Hello and welcome to the Defined Engagement BookCast. My name is Doug J. Fine. Today again we're going to be talking to Devin Halliday, the author of Belonging Factor, How Great Brands and Great Leaders Inspire Loyalty, Build Community, and Grow Profits. Today we'll be discussing Chapter 5, The Belonging Factor Explained. Devin Halliday, you are very welcome back. And I look forward to this discussion with you, and I hope you all enjoy this show. Thank you. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. I am Doug Fine, and I am down in Augusta, Georgia, and I have Devin Halliday up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with me today, and we're discussing today Chapter 5 of The Belonging Factor, how great brands and great leaders inspire loyalty, build community, and grow profits. The Belonging Factor. Devin, this chapter is entitled The Belonging Factor Explained.
It is, yes.
So you kind of get to the crux of the book and what it really means. And so there's a lot of detail in it. So I know you're not going to cover a lot of that today, but maybe the high points of the chapter. And talk about those 5 things, those characteristics of the belonging factor. But would you mind if I read a quote to you from one of the characteristics of belonging?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, and this is the defined roles and behaviors characteristic of belonging, and it's about value alignment. And you have a gentleman that I know you know personally. His name is Bobby Herrera. And he's the CEO of Populous Group, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more about them. But here's what Bobby says, and you quote him: "Over-communicate exactly how you expect everyone who is part of the culture to behave. Encourage your leaders to be unwavering in their demands about the company principles." So this dude, he got it. You know, he knows. For some reason, it has worked that he, you know, it's inculcating and having people know, you know, it's practically breathing. You cannot separate what you do every day from what you know and have heard about the values of the organization. And that's a rare thing, because you said earlier in an earlier talk, you know, a lot of people put their values on the wall and then just walk away and do everything opposite. So this Bobby Herrera, he's onto something, because it's not a one-shot deal. We know when we're trying to develop culture or change it or enhance it, that it's got to, you know, it's got to be lived, and it's got to, people need reminders and refreshers, and people need to talk about it in their own interpretation of the values to make it happen. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but that was a great quote. What do you want to say about Chapter 5? You're welcome to fire away.
Yeah, so Chapter 5, The Belonging Factor Explained, you were right. It is the meat of those principles and characteristics that great organizations and great leaders demonstrate routinely to deliver these outcomes, right? So this is very much getting into the how. But I work really hard to try and just connect dots for you as the reader, rather than be very prescriptive about each step to go down. Now, there are some great tools. Once you've bought the book, you can go to the website links in the book, and you can get all these amazing free digital tools to help you through those step-by-step elements. But I felt it was very important to ensure that I don't know each reader and their situation and their dynamic, but I do know those principles after studying them very closely and very carefully that lead to the characteristics of a great organization and a great leader. And that's what Chapter 5 is really all about. Bobby Herrera happens to be one of those men. He is very humble, and he will tell you himself that that he's working every day to aspire to be the things that that are written in this chapter. And I would tell you that the reason he is the leader he is because he's consciously working every day at these types of elements. And so Bobby, he actually was raised the son of immigrant farm workers. He was kind of nomadic as a teenager, followed his parents around to wherever crops needed picked.
Wow.
And that's how things worked. So think about what that looked like growing up with no money, a completely different view on the world and life than most of us have because of not really having roots in a place to really call home. His father's home was Mexico, and his father vowed that his children would never have to try to do the things that he did to build a life. And so that was a foundational element for Bobby. And he writes a lot about his stories in his book called The Gift of Struggle. And it's a book that everybody should really check out. The Gift of Struggle. It's lessons that he learned from his struggle that he's applied into his life and what those outcomes have been as a result of applying them the right way.
Cool.
And one of the things over many conversations that he and I have had that really stood out to me is this idea that no matter what you come up with, no matter what you decide as a leader, you have to over communicate it regularly, explicitly, clearly, and you have to model it. That's, by the way, the most effective form of communicating it, right, is to live it. We never want any of our people to say, "Oh yeah, this captain, do what I say, not what I do." And by the way, people tend to emulate leaders or other people that they admire, that they respect.
Yeah.
And the same way that I wrote in an earlier chapter that my very first leadership role, I emulated leaders that I didn't respect and didn't admire because they were achieving career goals that I wanted to achieve. But I learned that it didn't align with my values and it sucked and it didn't get the outcomes I wanted. So.
And people hated you.
Yeah, yes, they did. Yes, they did. But fortunately, they didn't hate me more than they liked themselves, the job, and what we could accomplish together because they were willing to talk to me and I was willing to listen.
Absolutely, man. I was being facetious about it.
No, but it's true.
They respected you enough to say, "Come
right.
on, Devin, we need to tell you how you're choking here."
Yes.
And in love, I'm sure they were just like, they wanted to see, they liked what they, anyway, we don't need to go there, but you had
go back and listen to, I think it's chapter 2.
Yeah. You had an open mind.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, this element to me was really foundational because clearly one of the most important principles, if you are going to create an environment where there's alignment in values and behaviors, there's alignment in a person's interests, their purpose, and their work product. There's alignment in a customer's decision to buy from your brand. To do that, you have to very clearly define what success looks like, what behaviors are going to look like, what it means to be part of this group. So one of the biggest recommendations that I have always given when I go do the work as it relates to belonging factor with companies is to examine what are your value priorities and statements. What do you say to your employees, to your customers, and to yourselves that you are as an organization? And most of the time, employees and even senior leaders don't even know it. They have a vague idea, maybe. Whoever wrote it tends to know it. The marketing people tend to know it because, especially the internal PR folks tend to know it because they put out a lot of propaganda. We'll call it that because that's kind of what it is. It's not backed up by anything. However, the second you follow that up with, okay, cool, so let's look at your sales department. Now let's look at your sales leaders, your VPs and your directors. What are the behaviors that they should be demonstrating that align with this value and this value and this value? And then what about your mid-level managers, your regionals, districts, your frontline managers, your frontline employees? And there's no answer.
Right.
So that means that A, we're not communicating, we're not defining truly, we're not communicating, we're not modeling. So we're missing on all these opportunities for us to actually live this thing that we said was important. So what does that go back to? Either A, it wasn't really important, we just had to do it because it was a...
Everybody else was doing it.
It was a line item that our board said they wanted us to get done, right? Number one. Or number two, they're the right things, we just don't have any priority on it because it's not on a Q10 or K10. It's not on a quarterly sheet that we have to read out to the board or to the public or to our investors. So it becomes diminished in the value that it actually offers. And it even becomes even more diminished when there's ambiguity and lack of clarity about what it means to live these things. The company I worked for almost 2 decades had what we called a credo. One of the things I thought was really important was every meeting that I had, we read the credo.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. 9 paragraphs. And we read the credo at the start of every meeting, and we would do credo shares. We would talk about things that we've experienced, whether somebody in the room or somebody outside of the room, or something we observed with a customer or with a vendor or a supplier or a leader that demonstrated a specific element of the credo. Kind of the gratitude, mostly recognition, but a little bit of gratitude in there as well. I felt that that was an important way to ensure that this stayed relevant and important for us. And then in each one-on-one, we would talk about what it looked like to live certain elements of this and what things we were doing that didn't align. And by the way, it wasn't a one-way conversation. It always was two-way. And it didn't have to wait for one-on-ones. My employees would call me out right on the spot if they needed to. And keep in mind, I'm leading leaders, so sometimes they could be pretty direct and pretty harsh. But man, really good stuff. So when you talk about, Bobby laying that out for me, it resonated so well with me, because it was something that while I knew it was important and I did in certain scenarios, I didn't realize the gap in how infrequently it was done on a broader scale until I really started looking into this. So there's 4 other elements that I think we should just really touch on if we could. So defining the roles and the behaviors is one. Building intellectual diversity. So not just what your people look like, what your people sound like, but what they can bring to the table when you're building a team. And I like to say it this way. I walked in and started talking to an organization who said, okay, well, we've got 2 female and we've got 3 minority people on our senior leadership team of 8, right? So cool. So 5 of 8 ticked diversity boxes. I think 1 was a veteran, white male, but still a veteran. And so I said, okay, well, that's awesome. What does that mean though? What do you get as a result of that? And I started looking at the CVs, at the resumes of these people, and we're talking like Ivy League schools, all of them. Their MBAs, all done at similar schools, Georgetown MBAs from 2 or 3 people. And I'm going, okay, so not that everybody who goes to the same school thinks the same way.
Sure.
But what real diversity of thought and experience are you bringing in to this senior leadership team when you have people who've all kind of gone through this upper crust, schooling, Ivy League schooling and process, and been taught in a similar way, to think in a similar way, to assess the dynamics and synthesize information in a similar way. Yes, they're going to do it differently, but they all have a similar backbone. And so what was really interesting is then they started to examine different pieces of recommendations that they would be getting. And what came, I think, was a realization that, this is kind of homogenized. This is a little just kind of plain.
In spite of the difference in ethnicities and
because
genders.
Because the folks experienced very similar life circumstances throughout the majority of their life. They experienced very similar career progression and trajectories. And certainly people who have different skin color, different gender, experience things in public in different ways, no doubt about it. However, it was still way too similar to say, hey, we're adding value because of our diversity.
Right.
And that's what diversity is really all about, right? Is what value do you bring? How do you enhance that rising tide, right? How do you lift all the boats? Because of this diversity, and it's through the inclusiveness of that diversity. So then I get into talking about the last 3 factors.
Sure.
Model what's expected, and this is super, super important, and it breaks down into, I think, 5 subcategories that are really important. It sounds simple, and if you're listening to this or watching this, you're going, oh, great, this is some garbage. No. Model what's expected it gets into some good stuff. Obviously, you have to make sure that you empower others, and this is about being a leader who looks at people, not processes and systems and outcomes. I just shared an example previously about a time where that didn't happen for me, and my team was able to bring me back into that in a meeting in a really effective way by sharing a gratitude. So go back and listen to chapter 4, watch chapter 4.
Yeah, good story there.
And then the last one, fostering collaboration. And this couldn't be possible without those others. And that's why I say it's kind of the last one, because it requires people to trust you, the direction you're taking them. It requires them to trust you even when their work dynamic changes and they're now working out of their home office with their kid who's trying to homeschool and their dogs who are barking and all of those other things that are going on in our worlds right now, where they have to trust that, my goodness, this person is going to help me achieve what I need to. And so that collaboration is so important. This is the part that you don't become reliant on your leader to direct you, but as an individual, you become a person who is empowered to achieve whatever it is that you need to achieve through all the resources you have. You don't see diversity as a threat or diversity as a divisive thing in some way. You see it as an opportunity to learn. You don't see your leader giving recognition and gratitude to somebody else as a threat to you.
Right.
You see that as a leader who inspires and is aware of the people who work for them and what they're doing. And you take solace in knowing that your leader's probably seeing that about you as well.
Yeah.
So those are all the things that come as a result of these elements here that drive so deeply into that sense of belonging. That is the magic sauce that brings out all of the stuff that you're trying to get from employees when you talk about engagement and when you talk about productivity and when you look at your productivity per head count and all these other things that we measure in business. They're all metrics. But as a leader, if you are trying to lead by one of those metrics, we know you're not going to hit your metrics, Doug, if you're just looking at it, right?
Right.
What we do know is if you're looking at the people that deliver those metrics and you're creating an environment through these characteristics that engender that sense of belonging, people are going to be loyal to themselves, their values, the alignment of those values, the purpose they deliver, and the outcomes it give you as a leader and as a brand. And the same works for customers. The same works for customers. You do these same 5 characteristics as an organization so well internally, it reflects externally, and your market potential grows so significantly.
Hey, I want to, before we close out, Devin, this concept of micromanaging, we're famous for saying it. And, if I do leadership development, what do you hate in a manager? Well, they micromanage us. We don't ever want to do that, but a lot of people do. And you just say something really profound. I think you just say micromanaging like imperils belonging. It is actually like a threat. So, does micromanaging come up when you're talking about empowering others? Like it's the opposite of empowering others is micromanaging. Say a couple of things about micromanaging from your viewpoint and how really destructive it is.
Yeah. So, a lot has been said on this topic already that I don't know if I'm going to be able to add something new to, but in my words, micromanaging is a sign of a leader who does not have a firm grasp of what's happening with their people, what's happening with the systems or tools or processes that their people use, or it's indicative of a leader who gained their success through their own individual efforts in this thing, and so they want to be very prescriptive to others to try to do it their exact way that they did it. Because again, they don't have a grasp of people. And how people are different and thrive and excel in different ways.
Right.
And so there's also, I think, one last factor of micromanaging, and it's driven by fear. And that fear is usually they're getting a lot of pressure. They don't necessarily know how to lead people, not because they're a bad human. They just maybe don't know very well, and they haven't used the belonging factor to be able to do it. And so that fear drives them to just go micromanage outcomes, tasks, dates, completions, urgency, etc. So it is if you were going to describe, so Superman, what is the one thing that kills him?
Kryptonite.
kryptonite. Everybody knows that, right? So micromanaging is the kryptonite to a sense of belonging, to an empowered and engaged workforce.
It takes your energy away.
It sucks all of the air out of people.
Mm-hmm.
It creates distraction. It creates what is called the grapevine leadership, right? Those people who, it's that under the surface, it's the leaders within your group of dissent that are working for you. So they start to just chatter back and forth and texting or calling each other, grumbling, which is taking away productivity. It's also taking away their creativity, their interest, all of those other things. So for anybody who finds themselves in a position where they're micromanaging, to know that it's likely not because you're a bad human, and likely not because you can't be a great manager, but more likely because you're missing one of those elements on the factor, that you go back and you go, ooh, which gear is it? Which gear right now am I struggling with? Oh, I'm the whole part where I'm modeling what's expected, so I'm not doing really deep introspection to understand for me what's of value and what's important, and am I doing those things? That's where I got to go, because man, I don't want to be a micromanager, and I'm not usually one, right? It might be that, or it could be on foster collaboration, right? So but if you know exactly what your system that you want to do is, which is, I would opine that it's the belonging factor, and it's the 5 characteristics there, then you can go back and you can just figure out where it's broken, and you can go fix micromanagement. But if you don't, forget it, you're done. You just hang it up. Your team is not going to deliver for you consistently over time. You may get a few burst results, but you will lose your best people, you'll keep your worst, and your outcomes will move further and further away from what you're trying to achieve.
Right. Hey, Devin, we covered chapter 5. It's a rich chapter. It's meaty. It's the meatiest chapter in this book. And the book is, again, belonging factor, how great brands and great leaders inspire loyalty, build community, and grow profits. So Devin, we'll be back together soon for chapter 6. And I want to thank you for your time again today. And have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you when we meet again.
Great. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you came to this Defined Engagement Bookcast. Next time, we're going to be discussing Chapter 6 of Belonging Factor. It's called A Case for Belonging in the Workplace. You can find other webcasts and podcasts and bookcasts at this address. Please go there. A lot of good conversations that happen there. And finally, thank you again for joining me. And I'll see you again next week. Again, this is the Defined Engagement Bookcast with Doug Fine. Take it easy and enjoy your week.